So my fifth tip, and in the words of the great Biggie Smalls, number 5, this probably should have been number 1 to me. Welcome to Debt Free in IT. I'm your host, Mike. This podcast is for anyone who's looking to get into the IT industry, whether it's for a career change or you're just interested. I think you come to the right place. In today's episode, I put together a list of my top 7 tips for any IT professional. So these are the tips that I wish someone would have told me when I first started my career. And then also some of these tips is tips that I picked up on as I progressed through my career. So as I went from position to position, some of these tips stand true in every position. So a lot of these tips I'm pretty sure help someone that's transitioning into tech. And some of these tips, even if you're already into tech, may even be useful for you also. So without further ado, let's get into my first tip. So my first tip is to keep good documentation. So as you're in your IT career or you're in the middle of your IT journey, a lot of times you're going to end up working in what we call a ticketing system. So with those ticketing systems, it's there for you to, of course, get tickets of different issues that needs to be resolved. But also, when you resolve those tickets, most of them you'll have a section that you can put in what you did to fix that issue. So in this case, if that issue comes back months later, you got something you can refer back to and see how did you resolve that issue, because a lot of times it may not stay in top of mind. So you'll be forgot by the time you see it again. And then also, whenever you have changes on your environment or changes in your infrastructure, or let's say you're doing a project and you're making some implementations or you're doing some changes, and let's say that when you do those changes, everything goes haywire. So if you don't have good documentation, you may not be able to revert those changes back, especially if I'm talking from a networking aspect, because you're making changes on a live environment. So a lot of times, if you don't have good documentation and you make that change and you don't know what config you took out of there, or you're not able to revert that change back, a lot of times you're going to be in worse shape than what you started. You're going to be in very bad shape, because you need to be able to make sure that you can revert back, or even if you make a change and then you may not start hearing about issues from that change till days later. So then you need to be able to know that, okay, let me go back and look at my notes and see what changes I did or whatever happened, or if I can revert it back to resolve this issue. So my first tip, make sure you keep up with good documentation. Document everything. Sometimes you may, like I said, you can use that ticketing system. A lot of times I'm a firm believer of something like OneNote, where I can put all my notes into one place. But you want to make sure you got some kind of documentation, because sometimes not documenting can come back to haunt you. My second tip, I pretty much consider this a no-brainer. So my second tip is you want to be a team player. So a lot of times you're going to be working in team environments. So you may have a team of 5 to 10 people, depending on the size of your organization, or you may have a team as small as 3 or 4 people. So a lot of times that team going to end up being similar to your work family. Well, not similar to, they're going to end up being your work family. So in this team environment, you don't want to be the person that's hard to work with. So you don't want to be the one that if an issue comes around and someone needs help, they don't want to call you. You want to be that team player, be easy to work with, because that way there's going to come times where someone may have to call you for an issue. Let's say if you're on call and it's late night or something like that, someone gets a call, they may have to call you to fix that issue for them. They may not know how to do it. Or it may be vice versa, where you're on call, somebody calls you, you don't know how to resolve that issue. Then you're going to have to call a teammate, wake them up, and ask them for help to resolve that issue. So you want to be easy to work with, because word gets around fast if you're not easy to work with. So you want to be easy to work with, be a team player, because if you're on a small team, a lot of times that team is going to be almost like your work family. You're going to end up having a group chat together. You're going to end up maybe texting people on the weekends, because it's going to become almost like that small community just between your team. So you want to make sure that you're not the one that they don't want to call for any help, because a lot of times it's going to go for both ways. They're going to end up needing you, and then there's going to come a time where you end up needing them. So my second tip, make sure you're a good team player. So my third tip is to own up to your mistakes. So a lot of times in this field, you're going to end up making mistakes. I'm pretty sure I've made a lot in my day. I remember making all kind of mistakes. I remember being nervous, make a mistake, shut something down. But one thing I always did was I never was afraid to own up to it. If it was something I did that took this down, I'll go ahead and tell you, hey, I made a mistake and I did this. But once you own up to the mistake, you need to make sure you learn from it. So this is where I would take notes and say, okay, I did this command on this device and this was the result. So now I can go back and kind of learn from it. And then also when I made that mistake, that wasn't the end of that situation. So a lot of times you make a mistake, you don't want to just make a mistake and depend on someone else to go and fix it, even though it might end up being someone else that fix it. But you want to, once you make that mistake, you still want to join in and try to help fix that issue. That way, even if it's somebody else that's doing most of the hard work, because it may be something that you may not have learned yet, but at least you can shadow that person and see what they did to fix that issue. That way you learn from it, because now you done shadowed with this person who fixed that issue. So now you took notes and you know that next time when this issue happens that, okay, this is what I need to do because I shadowed my coworker and I saw them fix this issue. So the next time this happens, I'm going to take the responsibility and say, okay, let me handle this issue. Let me go ahead and resolve this issue. So you're going to take notes from it, learn from those mistakes. And a lot of times if you end up not trying to own up to your mistake or trying to blame it on something else, a lot of people don't realize that everything in this IT or in the industry or in the organization, everything is tracked and leaves a digital footprint. So that digital footprint is your username accessing that device. So it's easy to go in and check the logs and say that, okay, the last person that went in on this device before it went down was this username. And also they went in and they did this command. So a lot of that stuff is audited, tracked, everything. So it's in your best interest to own up to any mistakes, because also it shows a form of integrity also, that you're not just someone that's going to throw a rock and hide your hands, if you know what I mean. So my third tip, own up to your mistakes. So the fourth tip, this is something that I wish I would have learned earlier. I kind of did it a little bit, but as I got older and got more seasoned in my career, this was one of the things that I think will help a lot of individuals out in their career. So this fourth tip is to build a professional network. So with your professional network, not just a network within where you work at, as you start going out, meeting different people, you want to make sure you build up that professional network, because a lot of times your professional network is going to end up being the person or the people or the whoever that gets you your opportunities. So a lot of times you may not even be looking for another opportunity, but someone you met in your professional network, they may have ended up getting on somewhere at a good company or something, and you come top of mind that, oh, I met such and such and they do the same thing I do. Let me just reach out and see if they may be interested in this. So that way you just got another opportunity and you wasn't even looking for it. And then also if you're trying to get into this field, like I said, building up that professional network lets people know that, okay, this is your interest and this is what you're trying to do. So that professional network, you may have somebody say, oh, I know someone who's hiring, or I know someone who's a manager who's looking for someone that's kind of suited, that you may be suited for that role. So building up this professional network, like I said, is going to end up being beneficial for both parties, for you and also for your network, because like I said, you're going to end up helping each other out, and that's going to go a long way. So building that professional network could mean that, you know, you're meeting people in person. Could mean that you're meeting people online. I know LinkedIn is real good for that. Also, you don't have to keep it to just LinkedIn. A lot of times, a lot of the people I've met that I talk to a lot and I've never met in person, a lot of times I probably met them, I think, on Instagram more. You know, Instagram and LinkedIn, I usually meet people on there. I meet a couple people on TikTok, things like that. But a lot of people, even before I started doing this podcast, there's a lot of networking professionals that I've built a relationship with. And a lot of that came from Instagram, and something like that. It just came from me being curious. You know, I see them post something about networking that I'm interested in, I would reach out to them. Or if I see them posting something about security that I'm interested in, I would reach out to them, and we ended up like building that rapport. And then that way, you know, I got someone that if something comes up that I can help them with, I would do it. If something comes up that they can help me with, hopefully they'll do it too. So building up this professional network is one of the main core pieces within your career, and not just in IT. I think having that professional network will help you out in any field you try to get into. So make sure you build up that professional network. And that was my 4th tip. Sorry to interrupt this video. According to my YouTube analytics, 84% of my viewers are not subscribed. If I provided any value to you in any one of my episodes and you're not subscribed, please consider doing so, because it does help out the channel. And also, if you're listening to this in your favorite podcasting app, please leave me a review and share this episode with a friend. Now back to the episode. So this next tip, number 5, this probably should have been number 1 to me, in the words of the great Biggie Smalls. And that's test before you deploy anything. So before you make any changes on your network, or before you make any kind of changes in your organization, you want to make sure you know what that change is going to do in your production environment. So a lot of times, if you're in a server environment, a lot of times you will have a test server that you go and make that change, or you do whatever you need to do. Therefore, you know that, okay, this will work. If you're networking, a lot of times you get a chance to plan it out. You know, you get a chance to plan out whatever configs you're going to put into this new device, or whatever config you're going to change. So in planning it out, you also get a chance to make sure you copy that old config. That way, if your plan don't go according to as it should, you can put it right back to normal. And then also in some networking environments, you'll have a simulation environment where I know Cisco has a product called CML, where some organizations have CML, and they put a simulated network of their whole infrastructure inside of CML. That way, when you got these big changes you're about to make, you can go into that simulated environment to make that change, see how your network reacts, make sure it's good. And then when it's time to make it on the real equipment, you can go in, make that change. Then that way you at least have some assurance. You know, some things still could go wrong, but if you took your due diligence before making that change, no one could really be mad at you. Like, oh, I did everything in my power to make sure that this is going to work. Just so happened, this little amount of things still happened and it didn't work. So no one can really be mad at you there, because you done tested it before you deployed it. So that's with everything. You want to make sure, if there is a way to test it before you make that change, make sure you do so, because like I said, a lot of times it could end up affecting your whole organization. So I've seen sometimes where it may affect a lot of laptops or a lot of desktops, things like that, where if once it affects the whole organization, then it becomes a big deal. And then, you know, if you didn't test it out, of course, there are probably going to be some repercussions for you not testing it out. So number 5 probably should have been number 1. Test everything before you deploy it. So my 6th tip is you want to stay learning. So in this IT industry, things change fast. Technology changes fast. What's here today could be gone tomorrow. So you want to always stay learning. So you don't want to get into this industry and think that, oh, once I got into the door, I'm through learning. You're going to always be learning. So you're going to always be chasing maybe a certification. You're going to be always trying to get that experience and that knowledge in certain technologies. So it could end up where, yeah, you may start out with that CCNA, but then from there, you may find out that, oh, I need to go get this CCNP. Then from there, let's say your organization adopt a cloud product. Let's say they adopt Amazon. So now you need to learn networking within Amazon, within AWS. So you're going to always be learning, you know, so that's what makes the field interesting to me, because things change. It's like years ago, you know, I never would have thought that I would see networking and programming come together. You know, that's something like in my furthest dreams, I never would have thought that, even though other people may have already seen it coming. But me just getting into networking, that was far from my mind. But here today, I sit where you got SD-WAN, you got network programmability. So a lot of things has changed, and it hasn't really been that long. So now it's coming to the point where some network engineers, depending on their organization, they need to know a little bit of Python. So then also, like I said, if their organization adopted some sort of cloud product, they need to start learning that too, because they're going to be interacting in it. So a lot of times you need to be able to adapt with the changes, because in your organization, things ain't going to just stay the same. So they're not going to have you there and you're just maintaining everything, that environment. A lot of times they're going to need to adapt with the changes, which is going to mean that someone needs to be able to support what they adapt to. So, and that person is going to end up being you. So you want to make sure you stay learning. Though you have to love learning. Like I said, this is one of those industries that you have to be a continuous learner, a lifelong learner. But like I said, just being curious in your organization, just being curious in your certain field of specialization is going to take you a long way, because you're going to be eager to learn. You're always going to be chasing for more knowledge. So this last tip I have, like I said, is something that I had to work on as I went through different job roles within my career. And that last tip is you want to be an effective communicator. So being an effective communicator, that can pertain to you communicating to your organization via email. So you need to be able to structure a good email to make sure whatever you're trying to get across is coming across clear and effective. And then also, you may end up working with people that's not technical. So you need to be able to take those complex topics, those complex issues, and break it down in a way that they understand it. And then also, you're going to be communicating with other teams within your IT infrastructure. So you're going to need to be able to communicate to them what's going on, because a lot of times if you're working with a analyst, and let's say it's an analyst that may not have no technical, may not be technical at all. So you're working with an analyst, and let's say you're in networking or security, and you're working on a project with them. So a lot of times you're going to need to be able to communicate from your point of view what's going on to them, to make sure they understand and make sure you're on the same page. So being an effective communicator, like I said, is something that's slept on, because a lot of people, you want the technical skills. You want to be able to do this with, you want to know about this hardware. You want to know about this technology. But a lot of times we sleep on being an effective communicator, being able to write an email, being able to word a good email, being able to get our point across without confusing people. So that's going to go a long way. So like I said, my last tip, you want to be an effective communicator, because you're going to end up communicating with a little bit of everyone, either non-technical, maybe someone technical, but they're just not technical in your specialization. So you're going to communicate with all components in this environment. So that brings me to the end of this episode. Hopefully you found some value in this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, you can follow me at DebtFreeInIT. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at debtfreeinit@gmail.com, or you can visit the website debtfreeinitwithmike.com. Other than that, I'll see you next week. Peace.